This is a revised chapter from One Switch 100, and it's about Reg Malling and some of the teams and people he influenced. I'm just going to read it straight. Stoke Mandeville Hospital in the UK is famous as the birthplace of the Paralympic movement in 1948. It's less well known as being a massive part of the most influential era in electronic assistive and communication technology. Riding upon a surge of 20th century medical innovation and refinements, people were increasingly surviving accidents, illnesses and conditions that previously would have killed them. Two priorities followed survival: improving independence and improving quality of life. Ideally, this led to people freeing bed space, going home, being with loved ones, and finding meaningful occupation and making their way in the world again. POSSUM, the patient-operated selector mechanism, was a revolutionary invention that made this possible for some of the world's most disabled people. It began in August 1960 at Stoke Mandeville's National Spinal Injuries Centre, when a 33-year-old patient, an ex-soldier, Ian Pritchard, met 32-year-old hospital volunteer, engineer and ex-soldier, Reginald Malling. Ian arrived at the hospital from southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, paralysed from the neck down after a water skiing accident. From the confines of his hospital bed, a police whistle suspended by a piece of string just above his lips was his main method of summoning help. For the first time since being a baby, he could do little himself. He spoke of his wish to record his experiences during the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya for a book. Reg wondered if there could be a way for him to operate a dictating machine independently, rather than relying upon the sporadic help of visitors and ever-busy hospital staff. Reg's epiphany was in realising that if a patient could control the air in their mouth to blow a whistle, then the same process might be used to operate electrical switches and relays. This could bring control over lights, tape recorders, and almost any number of electrical appliances. Reg was an industrial chemist by trade, but had long been tinkering with electronics. Aged 5, he was said to have built an electric fence to stop other children from getting at his toys and breaking them. He was known for his inventiveness, single-mindedness, good heart, grin, and dancing eyebrows when an idea was flourishing. Needing extra help to take his ideas further, he teamed up with fellow hospital volunteer and engineer Derek Clarkson, later Dorothy Clarkson. Derek's background included servicing Type X cipher machines in World War II, which was an unbreakable British enigma used to encrypt secret messages. When Derek paired up with Reg in 1960, he was working at General Precision Systems in Aylesbury on computer-aided flight simulators. Working Saturday mornings in the flight simulator lab and spare evenings on Reg's mother's sitting room floor, the first prototype possums took shape. The resulting tape recorder system was a breath-controlled dictating machine using a liquid mercury manometer. This was the first electronic sit-puff assistive technology, and with this, Ian swiftly gained independent control to record and organise his thoughts. The second wave of possums were far more powerful. The Environmental Control Unit, ECU, built from parts donated by General Precision Systems, enabled scan and select control over 10 items. And scan and select's where you can manually or automatically have your choices selected, and then you hit another switch or puff perhaps, and you can select them. These would go on to include control over alarms, lights, heaters, radios, door mechanisms, page turners, projectors, telephones, televisions and typewriters, all in the 1960s. The earliest of these environmental control units made use of uniselectors, relays and switch control to cycle through the available choices illuminated by light bulbs. The similarities between this and a Jameson's electro-dart machine make me wonder if Reg or Derek ever played one at a fun fair and took inspiration. And this was a wall game where you held a single switch and it would spin lights around a dartboard display, and hopefully if you got hit a number over 12, you'd win some money, a shilling upwards. Only you'd be very lucky to do so. Reg and Derek's experiments were so successful that upon demonstration to Sir Ludwig Gutmann in the Occupational Therapy Department, his vital approval for further development was given. Funding was found from the Polio Research Fund and work continued in earnest. A small team grew to include Joy Wakefield and Roger Jeffcoat, who would undertake much of the early assessment work. Possum transformed into Possum Controls Limited as a self-contained business, moving out from the hospital electromechanical laboratory into their own premises, secured at mates' rates. In 1966, pivotal to their ultimate survival, Possum were awarded an NHS National Health Service contract by the Ministry of Health. This was to supply their systems and support free at the point of need to patients around the UK. One of the most powerful Possum accessories was the typewriter control system, TWC. One or more switches were enough to scan and select from a grid of letters and symbols to print out via an electric typewriter. And here, a single switch was enough to convey ideas, wants, and needs. Some users memorised the grid, often out of necessity, if unable to reliably look at the card. Others would use an animated box of lights, transferring between the smaller ECU box and the typewriter control as needed. Bespoke methods of control were developed to match each user's needs, including a 4-switch sit-puff device with a word store system, enabling much faster typing speeds for some. Throughout, Reg and his team travelled the world to promote the benefits of the Possum systems. Often Reg would fly small borrowed planes and not always getting full air clearance en route. He was said to have caused a diplomatic incident in Israel on one supply flight and was buzzed and escorted by angry military jets. Alternatively, he'd squeeze Possum gear into his sports car to take wherever needed, which was safer that way. In 1968, the Possum User Association, which is now called Sequel, was formed by Elizabeth Beeston, the head of OT at Southport Spinal Injuries Hospital, and Roger Jeffcoat. The PUA was a support group and magazine set up to support and empower Possum users. Most importantly, it was run by Possum users themselves. Rebranded Possibility in 1969, it had subscribers across Europe, Scandinavia, Israel, North America, Canada, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. Possum users blazed a trail with their enabling technology. One user, Dick Boydell, programmed computers at Ford in the early 70s. Hilary Pohl, described in newspapers as the most disabled person in the world at the time, had poems published. Joy Wakefield's Sequel 25 Years booklet details many more life stories. Reg was ousted from Possum in 1973 after disagreements with the trustees, and Sir Ludwig Gutmann. In solidarity and protest, key members of the team left too. Despite this, by 1974, the National Health Service had supported over 500 Possum installations around the UK, enabling many people to live more independent and enriched lives. An entire industry formed, inspired by the original Possum devices, as can be seen in the Aids for Severely Handicapped by Keith Copeland. And this 1974 book features a dozen or so different environmental control and what's now known as AAC, augmentative and alternative communication systems. Rival companies brought innovations of their own to the field, as with Essex-based Zambet Electronics Systems 7 and 8. Options from Zambet included a proximity switch, enabling non-touch control with minimal strength, toy control, and reportedly a wall-protected typewriter. Zambet would later be absorbed by Possum. From Reg's and Derek's early work, a cross-pollination of ideas and practices were bursting into vivid life. Reg went on to form Malling Rehabilitation Systems and later Telemachus, which ran the UK's first online disability information resource in 1979 using Prestel. He also gave advice on the cutting-edge Mavis computer, microprocessor, audio-visual information system project. But without an NHS contract, it was difficult for Reg to make as much of an impact, leaving him somewhat cast adrift. Roger Jeffcoat left Possum with Reg, going a separate way to form the Ellis Trust in 1975. This was perhaps the first charity to support people needing a wide range of electronic assistive technology. Roger also co-founded AbilityNet in 1997 to provide advice on making computer technology more accessible to all. AbilityNet, the Ellis Trust, Now Everyone Can, Sequel and Possum all continue to make the world a better and fairer place for disabled people to this day. The following is some photos I did just to show some of the thread that runs through Possum to the current day. This is an early Possum system with SIP-Puff at National Star College, and this is a system in 1973 where a standard arcade pinball machine's been adapted to play with SIP-Puff. This is a newspaper article, 1978 to 1981, these were going on. Gary and Robbie Marintz were adapting arcade and pinball machines. Space Invaders, looks like Phoenix there, to play with SIP-Puff and other controls. Very early esports, really. This is a SIP-Puff controller for home consoles. This is an Atari VCS playing Space Invaders with someone playing with their mouth. This by Ken Yankelevitz, who's another amazing pioneer in accessible game. Well, Reg less so in accessible gaming, Ken 100% in accessible gaming. 1987, Nintendo's hand-free controller came from Nintendo America using SIP-Puff and a chin controller. Coming up to date with the quad stick, which comes straight on from Ken Yankelevitz's work. It's a brilliant device. And a game control mixer set up here with SIP-Puff 2, which is something I do with my other hat on at One Switch with Celtic Magic. Scan and select, really important threads here. This is early 1960s pictures. And you'll see a similarity with the typewriter, Bell, light, radio device, and NASA coming up with an idea, possibly for astronauts, but also showing for disabled people that maybe a wheelchair could be controlled with eye gaze. These were eye switches. It was an experimental system and NASA gave it away. That was early, very early eye gaze. This is miniaturization. This is the Tufts interactive communicator with things getting smaller. And this is Rick Hoyt using the same machine. And he has a brilliant book called One Letter at a Time. I really recommend reading. And this is the commercialization of reduced communicators, scan and select communicators, where you can get at anything. This is a very early Prentke Romich, and they got involved with Bliss symbols and all sorts of things for people who couldn't use the basic alphabet. Loads of people created these. Interesting, Namco used to make communicators as well, quite similar to this. This is the Mavis system. This is Joanne using it, and she's using a word processor with her mum here. This was a British-funded, it was a UK government-funded project from about 1977, 78 to about 81 when the government said the money's run out and they didn't want to run with this project. But it was a wonderful thing for this very small number of people who use this portable suitcase computer, and it had a word processor. You could create music with it, art, games. And there were games for people who couldn't cope with scan and select, and there was understanding not everyone can cope with that sort of level of complexity. And that's a mock-up of the ability to play the Blue Peter tune, which you may or may not know, with a single switch. This is what replaced that line of thinking, and this was the 8-bit computers coming in and ways to control it with scan and select here. This is a BBC Micro on the right and Apple computer on the left. This was the amazing adaptive firmware card in use where you could play Ms. Pac-Man, you hit a switch, the whole game stops, and then it scans through up, down, left, right, hit your switch, the game restarts and moves in that direction. It's a wonderful thing with its origins in Possum and Reg Malling. Stephen Hawkins playing chess using this scan and select communicator. He wrote A Brief History of Time using this technology. Apple integrated it into all of the mobile devices with iOS 7, which is a wonderful thing, really. And you'll find it in Microsoft. It's built into systems thanks to TUF, the Trace Center, pushing people like Microsoft and Apple to integrate accessibility features into the computers. This is One Switch Pulse system. This is a system that I've built that enables someone with a single switch to scan through options. And this is on a PlayStation 3 in this picture, where they can navigate all the menus and then play the game, and certain switches will bring up certain macros and just mash buttons, and Colin enjoyed destroying people with that. It was quite brutal. This is SpecialEffect's iMine, which although is eye gaze controlled, the grid has got origins back to Possum, and that's a wonderful system too. Versatile interface. This is Possum's push to allow people to use the equipment that they need. So sit puff, a gated joystick here with a foot. It could have been anywhere. Light pressure switches, and you'll see a line straight through all of the switch adaptive controllers up to the Xbox adaptive controller, and the game control mixer, game Celtic Magic, and one switch. A bit cheeky of me. Communication technology for those without a voice, environmental control, NHS free at the point of need, supported around the world, online in 1979, influenced, inspired others to carry the baton ever onwards, whether they know it or not. So thank you, Reg Malling. And this is a quote from Reg many years ago. That's his 1979 system there, actually, for sharing disability information. He said, "Our work has received tremendous assistance from a wide range of individuals, firms and corporate bodies, but it is to the severely disabled themselves that the major thanks must go. It was their courage in adversity which provided the determination to start and continue the project. I remember one lady who had literally only a flicker of movement in one toe. She went on to write a beautiful book of poems. It was quite extraordinary. We made a difference." Reg Malling. And I'll read that poem from Hilary Pohl. My world. I have a world that's mine alone, a world where no one else can roam, of books I've read and plays I've seen, an opera, a ballet theme, of roads I've walked and hills I've climbed, woods and fields stored in mind. So if at night I cannot sleep, I do not end up counting sheep. Instead I think of days gone by, of picnics 'neath a clear blue sky, the thrill of watching unawares a pair of boxing mad March hares. I wander down Lapel Lane again. I find a nest, I see a wren. The fields are full of ripening wheat, the banks are white with meadow sweet, and searching closer to the ground, bashful violets I have found. I squelch along the bridle path, thus awakening mother's wrath. I tear my coat, I cut my knee, but there's a squirrel stray to see. The landscape blurs, light fades fast. I smile and fall asleep at last. Hilary Pohl. That's it.